History books taught you about George Washington and Napoleon, but they never mentioned the warrior who defeated European armies with brilliant tactics, or the woman who freed hundreds while carrying a rifle. These 9 fighters changed the world forever. Then someone erased them. Until now. Before we reveal these forgotten heroes, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to learn was deliberately kept from you. And if you find this valuable, you'll want more stories like this. Now, let's meet the warriors history tried to bury. Every history class teaches the same heroes, the same generals, the same leaders. But there's a pattern to what gets remembered and what gets erased. The warriors you're about to meet didn't just fight battles. They won them. They didn't just resist oppression. They defeated it. Some built nations. Others freed thousands. A few faced down the most powerful empires on earth and refused to bow. Yet their names were deliberately removed from textbooks, their victories downplayed, their brilliance ignored. But the truth has a way of surviving. And today, these 9 warriors reclaim their place in history. In the early 1600s, Portuguese forces swept across Africa, conquering kingdom after kingdom. They had superior weapons, vast armies, and an endless appetite for land and slaves. Most rulers fell quickly, but in what is now Angola, they encountered someone who would haunt them for 3 decades. Her name was Nzinga, and she was unlike any opponent the Portuguese had ever faced. When she first arrived to negotiate with the Portuguese governor, he tried to humiliate her. He sat on a grand chair while she was expected to sit on the floor. Without hesitation, Nzinga ordered one of her servants to get on hands and knees. She sat on the servant's back, eye level with the governor, and negotiated as an equal. The message was clear. She would never be beneath anyone. When diplomacy failed, Nzinga became a warrior queen. She was in her 40s when the wars began, an age when most rulers stayed safely behind their armies. Not Nzinga. She led from the front. She learned Portuguese military tactics and turned them against her enemies. She formed alliances with Dutch forces and rival African kingdoms. She dressed as a man when needed, fought with her soldiers, and pioneered guerrilla warfare tactics that made the Portuguese pay for every inch of land. For 30 years, Nzinga held them off. She retreated into the mountains, built hidden bases, launched surprise attacks, and made the Portuguese occupation so costly they could barely maintain control. She negotiated treaties, broke them when advantageous, and played European powers against each other with masterful skill. When she finally died at 80 years old, she had never truly been defeated. Her kingdom remained independent because one woman refused to surrender. Yet most history books mention her in a footnote, if at all. A warrior who outfought European empires for 3 decades deserves more than that. 50 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, a man named Gaspar Yanga did something that wasn't supposed to be possible. He escaped slavery in Mexico and built a free settlement in the mountains. That alone would be remarkable. But Yanga didn't just survive. He thrived. For over 30 years, Yanga's settlement grew. Escaped slaves found freedom there. They built homes, farmed land, and created a community. The Spanish colonial government couldn't tolerate this. A free black settlement was a threat to the entire system of slavery. So they sent soldiers, professional troops with guns and orders to destroy Yanga's town and capture or kill everyone there. Yanga's forces, mostly escaped slaves with limited weapons, defeated them, not once, but repeatedly. Yanga proved to be a brilliant military strategist. He knew the terrain, used guerrilla tactics, and made the Spanish pay dearly for every attack. After years of failed military campaigns, the Spanish finally did something unprecedented. They negotiated. In 1618, they officially recognized Yanga's settlement as a free town, called San Lorenzo de los Negros. It was the first free black settlement in the Americas, established through military victory and strategic brilliance. Gaspar Yanga proved that resistance was possible, that freedom could be won, and that former slaves could outfight professional armies. His victory came decades before most textbooks even acknowledge black resistance existed. That's exactly why his story was buried. In 1791, something happened that terrified every slave-owning nation on earth. In Haiti, enslaved people didn't just rebel, they won. And the man who made it possible was a former slave who taught himself military strategy by reading books. Toussaint Louverture was 50 years old when the revolution began. He'd been freed before the uprising, but joined the fight to liberate others. What he did next changed history. He took untrained, poorly armed former slaves and transformed them into an army that defeated 3 European powers. Think about that. French forces, Spanish troops, and British armies all tried to crush the Haitian Revolution. Louverture beat them all. His military genius was undeniable. He understood that traditional European warfare wouldn't work, so he combined guerrilla tactics with conventional military strategy. He trained his forces relentlessly. He made strategic alliances and broke them when necessary. He used the terrain, the weather, and yellow fever as weapons against European troops. When the British sent thousands of soldiers, Louverture's forces destroyed them. When Napoleon sent his brother-in-law with a massive French army, Louverture outmaneuvered them for years. The French finally captured Louverture through betrayal, imprisoning him in France, where he died. But by then, it was too late. His student, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, completed the revolution. In 1804, Haiti became the first black republic, the first nation born from a successful slave revolt. Louverture made it possible. He proved enslaved people could defeat the greatest military powers of the age. That truth was too dangerous to teach. So, history books minimized his genius, focused on the brutality of the revolution, and made sure students never understood what he actually accomplished. In 1900, British forces in West Africa made a fatal miscalculation. They demanded the Ashanti people hand over their most sacred object, the golden stool, which represented the soul of their nation. The Ashanti king and male leaders hesitated, unsure whether to fight or negotiate. Then, a 60-year-old woman stood up and changed everything. Her name was Ya Asantewa, and she was a queen mother. When the men around her debated surrender, she challenged them directly. If the men wouldn't fight, she said, then the women would. She would lead them herself. Her words ignited the Ashanti. Within days, thousands rallied to her banner. Ya Asantewa didn't just talk about resistance, she led it. She organized the military campaign, directed strategy, and inspired her forces to fight against impossible odds. The British had modern rifles, artillery, and professional soldiers. Ya Asantewa's forces used whatever weapons they could find and fought with pure determination. They laid siege to a British fort, trapping colonial forces inside for months. The British had to call for reinforcements from across their empire to break the siege. The war lasted months. The British eventually won through sheer numbers and superior weapons, but Ya Asantewa made them pay dearly. She was captured and exiled, dying far from home. But she had proven something vital. That resistance was possible. That courage could challenge empire. that a woman could lead warriors into battle and nearly defeat one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. Her story should be taught in every history class. Instead, it's barely mentioned, a deliberate choice to erase female strength and African resistance. For over 200 years, the kingdom of Dahomey had a secret weapon that terrified their enemies. An elite fighting force recruited from the best warriors in the kingdom, trained from childhood in brutal combat techniques, sworn to celibacy and absolute loyalty. They were called the Agoji, but history knows them as the Dahomey Amazons, and every single one was a woman. These weren't ceremonial guards or symbolic figures. The Dahomey Amazons were frontline shock troops. They trained harder than male soldiers. Their exercises included running through thorn bushes, climbing walls covered in thorns, and learning to withstand incredible pain without flinching. They fought with rifles, machetes, and razor-sharp blades. In battle, they were ruthless and fearless. European colonizers who encountered them were shocked. Their reports describe women warriors who showed no fear, took no prisoners, and fought with skill that matched or exceeded male soldiers. When French forces invaded Dahomey in the 1890s, the Amazons were the fiercest resistance they faced. French soldiers admitted these women were the toughest opponents they'd ever encountered. They fought to the last, refusing to surrender even when defeat was certain. At their peak, thousands of women served in the Dahomey Amazons. They protected their kingdom for generations. But when colonizers wrote the history books, they downplayed their significance, dismissed them as exotic curiosities, or erased them entirely. The idea of elite black female warriors contradicted too many racist and sexist narratives. So, history tried to forget them. But the truth survived. These women were elite warriors who defended their nation with unmatched bravery. In the late 1800s, as European powers carved up Africa, one ruler in Sierra Leone managed something remarkable. He maintained his kingdom's independence not through submission, but through a brilliant combination of diplomacy and military strength. His name was Almami Suluku, and he understood something crucial. You didn't always have to destroy your enemies. Sometimes you could outlast them. Suluku ruled the Biriwa Limba people during the scramble for Africa, when European nations were desperately grabbing territory. The British wanted his land. So did the French. Suluku played them against each other masterfully. He signed treaties with both sides, but kept his actual independence. When British forces pushed too hard, he allied with the French. When the French became aggressive, he shifted toward the British, all while maintaining his own military force and genuine sovereignty. He wasn't just a diplomat. Suluku was a military leader who won battles when necessary. He understood modern warfare and equipped his forces accordingly, but he also knew when not to fight. He avoided the all-or-nothing confrontations that destroyed other African kingdoms. Instead, he negotiated, delayed, compromised on small issues, and held firm on what mattered. For decades, he kept his kingdom functionally independent, while nations around him fell. Eventually, British control tightened enough that true independence became impossible. But Suluku had bought his people decades of freedom that others lost immediately. His strategic brilliance deserves recognition. Instead, he's mostly forgotten, a regional figure whose accomplishments were never properly recorded by the colonizers who eventually absorbed his kingdom. In the mountains of Jamaica, there's a legend about a woman who could catch bullets, who knew spiritual warfare and military tactics, who freed so many enslaved people that the British offered massive rewards for her capture. They never caught her. Her name was Nanny, and she was one of the most successful resistance fighters in history. Nanny was born in West Africa and either escaped slavery or was born free in Jamaica. Either way, she became the leader of the Maroons, escaped slaves who built free communities in Jamaica's mountains. But Nanny wasn't content with personal freedom. She sent raiding parties to plantations, freeing enslaved people and guiding them to safety. She trained warriors and led them in guerrilla warfare against British troops. The British controlled Jamaica with overwhelming military force, but they couldn't defeat Nanny. She knew every trail, every hiding spot, every strategic position in the mountains. Her warriors used the jungle like a weapon, appearing suddenly to attack British patrols and disappearing before reinforcements arrived. Nanny also understood psychological warfare. Stories spread about her supernatural powers, her ability to catch bullets, her spiritual protection. Whether true or strategic myth-making, these stories made her legendary. For years, Nanny's Maroons humiliated British forces. Finally, the British did something unprecedented. They signed a treaty recognizing Maroon independence. The colonial power that controlled Jamaica had to officially acknowledge that Nanny's people were free and autonomous. That treaty lasted. Maroon communities remained independent within Jamaica. Nanny had achieved through warfare what few resistance leaders managed: actual legal freedom and autonomy. Yet her story is barely known outside Jamaica, buried in history books that prefer narratives of inevitable colonial victory. By the 1890s, European colonization of Africa seemed unstoppable. Nation after nation fell. But in the kingdom of Dahomey, King Bahanzin decided to fight. Not a symbolic resistance. A real war with modern weapons and professional strategy. He came terrifyingly close to winning. Bahanzin inherited a kingdom under threat. The French wanted Dahomey's territory and had been gradually encroaching for years. When Bahanzin took the throne, he made a decision. No more compromise. No more slow surrender. If the French wanted Dahomey, they would have to take it by force. So Bahanzin prepared for war. He purchased modern rifles, trained his army, fortified positions, and organized the Dahomey Amazons into shock troops. When the French invaded, they expected an easy victory. They were wrong. Bahanzin's forces fought brilliantly. They used guerrilla tactics and conventional warfare. They adapted quickly to French strategies. In several battles, Dahomey forces nearly defeated the French completely. The war was so costly that France seriously considered abandoning the campaign. But European pride and imperial ambition wouldn't allow it. They sent more troops, more weapons, more resources. Eventually, sheer numerical and technological superiority won. But it took far longer and cost far more than France expected. Bahanzin was captured and exiled. He spent his remaining years in exile, never seeing his homeland again. But he had proven that African kingdoms could fight European powers on nearly equal terms with the right leadership and resources. His resistance inspired others across Africa. Yet history books treat him as a footnote, if they mention him at all. Another inconvenient truth buried by the victors: not all warriors carry swords. Some carry ideas so powerful they threaten empires. In the early 1700s, a young woman in the Kingdom of Congo had a vision. She claimed saints spoke to her, telling her to restore her fractured nation and drive out Portuguese influence. Her name was Kimpa Vita, though she called herself Dona Beatriz, and she started a movement that terrified European colonizers. The Kingdom of Congo had been torn apart by civil wars and Portuguese manipulation. Different factions fought for the throne, while Portuguese missionaries controlled spiritual life, and Portuguese traders controlled commerce. Kimpa Vita said enough. She preached a version of Christianity where Jesus was black, where Congo was the Holy Land. where African people didn't need European priests to reach God. Her teachings spread like wildfire. Thousands rallied to her message. She didn't lead an army with weapons, but her movement was absolutely a form of warfare. It challenged Portuguese religious control, which was fundamental to their colonial power. If Congolese people didn't need European Christianity, they didn't need European anything. Kimpa Vita's followers began rebuilding their capital city, uniting behind a new vision of Congo independence. The Portuguese-backed king and Catholic missionaries recognized the threat immediately. They captured Kimpa Vita when she was only in her 20s. They tried her for heresy and burned her at the stake in 1706. But her movement didn't die with her. It continued for years, inspiring resistance and Congolese identity. Kimpa Vita had waged spiritual and cultural warfare against colonialism, and she'd nearly won. History books barely mention her, another warrior whose weapon was ideas instead of swords, making her no less dangerous to the systems that tried to erase her. 9 warriors. 9 incredible stories. 9 people who achieved the impossible, who defeated armies, freed thousands, built nations, and challenged the most powerful empires on earth. Queen Nzinga fought for 30 years and never truly surrendered. Gaspar Yanga built the first free black settlement in the Americas through military victory. Toussaint Louverture defeated 3 European powers and made the impossible Haitian Revolution real. Ya Asantewa led warriors into battle at 60 years old and nearly drove out the British. The Dahomey Amazons fought as elite warriors for over 2 centuries. Almami Sulaku outmaneuvered colonial powers through brilliance and strategy. Nanny of the Maroons forced the British to recognize Maroon independence through guerrilla warfare. Bahanzin nearly defeated French colonization with modern military tactics. And Kimpa Vita waged spiritual warfare that threatened Portuguese control. Every single one of these warriors changed history. Yet their stories were deliberately erased. History books mentioned them briefly or not at all. Why? Because their victories contradicted the narratives that justified colonialism and slavery. Because their brilliance challenged racist assumptions. Because their strength threatened power structures built on the lie that some people were meant to rule and others meant to serve. But truth survives. These stories exist, and now you know them. Don't let them disappear again. Share this video right now. Send it to someone who needs to know the truth. Hit that like button so this reaches more people. And subscribe, because we're uncovering more deleted history every week. Comment below and tell me which warrior inspired you most. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Together, we're rewriting the history books they tried to close. These 9 warriors refused to be forgotten. Let's make sure they never are again. See you in the next one.